They got away with it, then couldn't shut up. The Zodiac Killer sent taunting letters to San Francisco newspapers for years, including coded messages. One cipher wasn't cracked until 2020. The BTK killer went quiet for decades, then mailed police a floppy disk that led directly to his arrest. And in 1994, a caller reportedly contacted a live Argentinian TV broadcast mid-case, taunting investigators on air. Each one escaped justice. Each one chose to reach back out. Investigators still debate why. Ego, compulsion, a need to be known. One theory suggests they feared being forgotten more than being caught. The Zodiac was never identified, so here's the question. Do you think they wanted to be caught, or just remembered? Follow for more cases like this. To understand this case, you need to understand Cleveland in the 1930s. It's a city under pressure. The Great Depression has gutted it. Unemployment is rampant. The shantytown along Kingsbury Run, a muddy ravine cutting through the east side of the city, is packed with transients, drifters, people with nowhere else to go. People nobody would miss. That's where the killer found his hunting ground. The first confirmed victims were discovered in September 1935. 2 headless, dismembered male bodies found in Kingsbury Run. The cuts were surgical, precise. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing with a blade. The heads were never found. Over the next 3 years, body parts kept surfacing. In the ravine, in the Cuyahoga River, in bushes and vacant lots around the city. The victims, men and women both, were decapitated, their limbs severed cleanly at the joints. Many were drained of blood before they were dumped. Investigators believed they were killed somewhere else and brought to the locations where they were found. 12 victims were officially linked to the same killer. Some researchers believe the real number was higher. Most victims were never even identified. They were listed simply as John Doe or Jane Doe. Lives erased so completely that even their names were lost. Press called the killer the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. And Cleveland was terrified. But here's the thing nobody outside law enforcement knew at the time. There was a man in charge of stopping this, and his name was already legendary. By 1935, Eliot Ness was Cleveland's director of public safety. He'd made his name in Chicago, taking down Al Capone with his team of incorruptible federal agents, the Untouchables. He was sharp, relentless, and deeply committed to the idea that law enforcement had to be clean. No corruption, no shortcuts, everything by the book. But the Torso murders were unlike anything he'd faced before. Capone was organized crime, a structure you could attack, a ledger you could audit. This was chaos, a predator operating in the dark, leaving no consistent witnesses, no clear motive, and no living victims to tell the story. Ness poured resources into the investigation. He consulted early criminal profilers, bringing in Dr. Royal Eyman and other experts to build a picture of who the killer might be. The profile that emerged was disturbing. Someone with medical or anatomical knowledge, likely of high intelligence, possibly someone who appeared completely normal in everyday life. Someone who could move through society without suspicion. In 1938, Ness made a controversial tactical decision. He ordered a massive raid on the Kingsbury Run shantytown, burning the makeshift shelters to the ground, dispersing the transient population. His reasoning: remove the vulnerable targets from the hunting ground. The killings did stop after the raid, but whether the raid stopped the killer or just pushed him elsewhere, nobody knew. And Ness still didn't have a suspect he could take to court. Or did he? And this is where the story stops making sense. Behind the scenes, Ness had been quietly investigating a man named Francis Sweeney, a doctor, a man with extensive anatomical training, precisely the kind of skill the killer would have needed to dismember bodies so cleanly. A veteran of World War I who reportedly struggled deeply with mental illness and alcoholism after returning home. And here's the detail that complicated everything. Sweeney was the cousin of a powerful U.S. congressman, a man with connections, a man whose family had influence. According to investigators and historians who later examined the case files, Ness became increasingly convinced that Sweeney was their man. In the summer of 1938, he reportedly arranged a secret interrogation, not in a police station, not on the record, but in a private hotel room. Ness and his team questioned Sweeney over several days. By some accounts, Sweeney was administered an early polygraph test, one of the first times such a device was used in a major investigation. According to those accounts, he failed it repeatedly, but a polygraph in 1938 was not admissible as evidence. And without physical evidence, without a surviving witness, without anything a prosecutor could stand up and present in open court, Ness had nothing legally actionable, nothing that could convict a man from a powerful family. So Ness made a different choice. Shortly after that interrogation, Francis Sweeney voluntarily committed himself to a mental institution. He would remain institutionalized in one facility or another for the rest of his life. He died in 1964, never charged, never tried, never publicly named as a suspect in the Torso murders. And the murders, officially, stopped. Here's what we know for certain. After Francis Sweeney was institutionalized, no further victims were conclusively linked to the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run in the Cleveland area. The killing pattern that had terrorized the city for 3 years went silent. But here's what we don't know, and what has haunted this case for decades. We don't know what actually happened in that hotel room. We don't know exactly what Ness said to Sweeney, or what Sweeney said back. We don't know whether Sweeney's decision to commit himself was truly voluntary, or whether Ness, one of the most powerful law enforcement figures in the city, made it clear that institutionalization was the only alternative being offered. We don't know if Sweeney was guilty. That last part is the one that sticks, because everything points in his direction. The medical knowledge, the failed polygraph, the geography, the timing. But pointing isn't proving. And the American legal system is built on the idea that you don't punish someone without proof, without a public process, without the chance to defend yourself. Eliot Ness believed he had his man. He also knew he couldn't prove it in court. So, according to the historical record, he found another way, a way that bypassed the courts entirely, that kept the powerful family's name out of the papers, and that removed the man he believed was a killer from the streets permanently. Was that justice? Or was it a lawman so desperate to close a case that he was willing to bend or break the principles he'd built his entire career on? There's one more layer to this that most people never hear about. From inside the institution, Francis Sweeney reportedly sent Ness taunting postcards for years, cryptic notes signed with his own name. Some investigators read them as the boastful behavior of a guilty man who knew he was untouchable. Others read them as the behavior of a disturbed man who had been unjustly confined and wanted Ness to know he hadn't forgotten. Even from behind locked doors, the case refused to close. So let's go back to where we started. Eliot Ness, sitting across from a man he believed had killed at least 12 people, knowing he couldn't prove it, making a choice. Was Francis Sweeney the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run? The weight of historical research leans toward yes. But leans is not proves. There are researchers who point to other suspects. There are those who believe the Torso murders may have even been the work of more than one person. And there are a handful of cases in other states, similar dismemberments, similar patterns, that some investigators have tentatively linked to the same killer, cases that occurred before and after Sweeney's confinement. Cases that complicate the neat narrative that putting Sweeney away solved everything. The official position of Cleveland law enforcement. The case remains unsolved. No one has ever been formally charged with the Cleveland torso murders. The victims, most of them still unidentified, have never received official justice. Eliot Ness never publicly discussed Sweeney as a suspect during his lifetime. He went on to other work, struggled with personal and professional setbacks in later years, and died in 1957, 2 years before his memoir, which didn't mention the torso case in detail, was published. Whatever certainty he felt in that hotel room, he took most of it with him. And Francis Sweeney died in 1964, institutionalized, uncharged, and by the official record of history, innocent. 12 confirmed victims, possibly more. 0 convictions. 1 secret confrontation that may have been the closest thing to an ending this case ever got, or may have been one of the most serious abuses of power in the history of American law enforcement. 60 years of historians arguing, and still no answer that satisfies everyone. The cold archive never closes a file. What do you think happened? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe because the next file is already open.